قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا مزيدا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. Al-Humaydi in his book جذوة المقتبس, there's a book Al-Humaydi wrote. In the book جذوة المقتبس, he wrote of the history of some of the leaders in Umara of Spain, of our Spain. And he wrote about a story about one of the leaders, and it included Ibn Hazm, the great Imam Ibn Hazm's father, who was from Spain. You know, Ibn Hazm was from Andalus. The leader, his name is Al-Mansoor. Al-Mansoor had a day when people would come into him and convey their problems, write letters of request, speak to him about matters. One day a woman came in pleading that her son be released from prison. Al-Mansoor had imprisoned her son. She came begging and pleading that Al-Mansoor release her son. When the captive's mother cried and began to beg Al-Mansoor, he got even more arrogant. He said, "Oh, you reminded me, your son is still a captive? Oh, we're going to execute him." So he took out a paper to write his order, as he always does. They go by the order of the paper. And he said, "Yuslab." He said, "Yuslab," meaning crucify him. When he wrote it on the paper, he said, "Yutlaq," which means release him. Then he handed the paper over to the minister, which is Ibn Hazm's father. His minister was Ibn Hazm's father, to carry out the crucifixion. Sometime later, maybe the next day, he asked his minister or deputy, Ibn Hazm's father, "Did you carry out the crucifixion?" He said, oh Amir, look at the order. You said release him. We're preparing him for release." Al-Mansoor, the leader, got angry. He said, "Crucify him." He said, "Crucify him." But as he's writing it, he said, "Yutlaq," release him. He's saying crucify him. His hand is writing, release him. And he gives it to Ibn Hazm's father. Again, he asked Ibn Hazm's father, "Did you people crucify that person, that prisoner?" He said, "Amir, you said release him. The paper says release him." A third time, he wrote, "Release him," while his mouth was saying, "Crucify him." Same scenario 3 times. When Al-Mansoor asked for the third time, he showed him the paper in his handwriting. It says release. He's being prepared for release. When they showed him the decree that he wrote, it finally sunk in his head, in Al-Mansoor's head, and he says, "يُطْلَقْ رَغْمَ أَنْفِ مَنْ أَرَادَ اللَّهُ إِطْلَاقَهُ لَا أَقْدِرُ عَلَى مَنْعِهِ." Let him go. Let him go. I have no control over this. Whoever Allah wants released, I could never keep him a captive. Who made a leader with all his power and might and his intention say something his own hands couldn't even write it? He said something while his own hands wrote something different. It is Allah whom you should be relying on, who caused his hand to write something different than what his mind wanted him to write. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِهِ. Allah is the only one who comes in between a man and a person and his heart. You have a marital issue, turn to Allah, because He controls your spouse's mind more than your spouse controls his mind or her mind themselves. When it's a work problem, put your reliance on Allah and turn to Allah, because Allah has more control over your employer's mind than he does himself. ما من دابة إلا هو آخذ بناصيتها. Not a moving, living creation except Allah grasps its forelocks. آخذ بناصيتها. You know what that means? Bedouins back in the days, they used to have camels. Camels are hard to restrain. But if you put a holster on the camel around his head, the head is about this big. You got full control over him. You move him left, right, forward, backward with that little restraint. And that's how Allah has control of every creation. You know John Grisham, the one who wrote many law-based novels. He wrote his first and I think his only non-fiction book, and it's only one I read of his books. It's a very good book, and it's lack of justice. It's about the lack of justice in the criminal system. It's called The Innocent Man. And it's a book that speaks about the lack of justice in the US system, and also about the torture of the electric chair. Very interesting book. But what caught my attention in that book when I read it, more than anything, was a story he mentioned years and years ago, of a man who was sent to be electrocuted. And he describes the man, black, slim, short, slightly over 100 pounds, very slim, very small. They put him in the electric chair. They strapped him down. And when they left the room to turn on the switch, just as they were about to close the door, when they closed the door, the young man, he's a man, but he's very small in his build. He breaks out of the straps and begins to run around hysterically in the electric room where they're about to electrocute him, until they bring the good squad that restrain him and take him back to his cell. No. He's a very slim and small guy, and he said he breaks out of the straps. Straps that the strongest of criminals never broke out of them. He didn't say he slipped out of them, which you can possibly understand, but he mentions his small size, and then he breaks out of them. The goon squad run in the room, restrain him, and take him to a cell, and they set another execution date. The next execution day, the same thing happens. He breaks out of the straps a second time. Then a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth, and a seventh time. On the seventh time, things happen differently. Every execution they set, as soon as they put him in the chair, he breaks out of the straps. And I said to myself, this is a great lesson in tawakkul. If the ummah, what did the Prophet ﷺ tell the Ibn Abbas? If the ummah came to harm you, and what Allah didn't want them to harm you, they couldn't. That's what happened the first 6 times. In the 7th time, it was written by Allah that His time has come. And if the entire universe on that 7th time came to spare his life, they wouldn't be able to spare his life. Isn't Allah worthy? The one who could do all that and more. Isn't Allah, the one who controls the universe, worthy of you putting your full tawakkul on Him in personal matters, in financial matters, in matters of this ummah? When they asked Al-Ahnaf ibn al-Qais, how did you master taqwa? He said, I know my provision, no one but me takes it, so my heart felt at ease. No stress over materialistic matters or your job or your paycheck. You put your tawakkul on Allah and you do your means. No one's going to take it. He said, I realized my deeds, no one can perform them but me, so I occupied myself and my time with my deeds. Then he said, I realized that Allah is always watchful over me, so I was ashamed to let Him see me committing a sin. Then he said, I realized that death is awaiting for me, so I gathered the provision for that journey. A man told him, so where do you eat from, Al-Ahnaf? And then he mentioned to him the verse, وَلِلَّهِ خَزَائِنُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Do you think Allah will provide a kafir sustenance and leave me out of it? Tawheed was meant to bring you ease and peace in this world and the ultimate goal in Jannah. This is Tawheed. Tawheed is to benefit you in both worlds. to bring you tranquility in life, to make you a firm, true muwahhid who relies with honor. That's the honorable life, who relies on Allah. A mountain full of problems rests on a believer's shoulder who has true tawakkul. Death in families possibly, lifelong in prison, maybe execution, maybe loss of wealth. With reliance, he takes it with a smile. Nas'alullah lana wa lakum al-afiyah. With reliance, he takes it with a smile. And he's, as if you see him, he's possibly like he's the happiest man. Then you see one who lacks tawakkul, and he gets a glimpse of that problem, maybe a flat tire, maybe the boss looks at him wrong, and he's got to go visit the psychiatrist and decide what therapy and what medicine he needs to go on. We took, alhamdulillah, dua, fear, hope, dua, fear, hope, and tawakkul. And we'll take, inshallah, al-raghba wal-rahba wal-khushu' next week, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi